But when that first came up, it looked like you just had a small hip flask. So I thought you were just doing some whiskey beforehand.
Really settling the nerves.
Cool,
Love it.
cool.
You can hear me okay?
Yeah, yeah, I can hear you well. So
Perfect.
let's give this it's already recording, so let's give this a crack. Yeah, if we have a situation where unemployment is 7 or 8%, all right?
Hmm. Yeah, it's a macroeconomic failure, not a
Yeah.
wireless failure.
I would be looking at our dear close friends at the RBA, and definitely not pointing at my wife, but I potentially might be, and saying, why are you letting unemployment be so high? Now, they would do the same thing that the US did after the global financial crisis and just say, oh, structural unemployment, there are structural factors why we can't loosen, etc., etc. How much do you think that that's true? Like, do you think there could be structural dislocations, such as through things like AI, that would lead to that? Or how much do you think it is just decision makers refusing to stimulate aggregate demand enough?
Yeah, this is dangerous territory. I'm not a macroeconomist by any means. But luckily I'm based in Canberra, so a long way away from Martin Place, so I can throw a few rocks. Uh, the answer is I don't know. So, historically speaking, I think they've done the RBA's had a few reviews into what they were doing previously. Can I remember what they say? No, I think they understimulated at some point while they were worried about house prices. But looking forward, structural changes, I assume, would be on their mind. But whether those structural changes are occurring quick enough in the context of something like Whyalla Steelworks, I think is unlikely. Um, do
That's
I
true.
think that the RBA or even fiscal policy can perfectly fine-tune inflation and unemployment rate to always be perfect? No, but if we're in a world of 7 or 8%, I think we're definitely in a world of macroeconomic management failure, and that turns to those who manage it.
That's very true. Now, if we were in a situation with 7 or 8% unemployment and a central bank saying we can't stimulate demand because this is structural unemployment, the world has changed. The nature of jobs, people are playing too many video games, and as a result, they're not willing to work. Well, in that situation, do you believe there's a role for government to start offering hiring subsidies or job retention subsidies to stem the flow of people entering unemployment?
So you've cornered me into a corner here, Matt. What's the failure that's causing the 7 or 8% unemployment? Structural changes because people like playing video games. I'm not worried if people like playing video games. That's good for them. I'm happy for them.
I'm being a bit facetious about the excuses
Okay.
used during the global financial crisis. So
Yeah.
unemployment was elevated, and so I forget that Australia didn't have a recession.
Yeah, we're in the
Lucky
land of
country.
plenty here, Matt. Yeah,
Yeah.
the land of
So
country.
New Zealand wasn't quite the same, and so we were paying attention to the US data, and the US scenario is very different. I mean, there's a whole series of posts about things we've talked about, I'll put below, but the US participation rates were falling and unemployment was high. So you had
Yeah.
a lot of like very talented economists going teasing through the data to understand, and they noticed that in time use surveys there was a sharp increase in video game playing. And then they went through and they tried to tease out how much that could actually be a contributing factor rather than just the fact that people are unemployed and they're using their time doing that. And they found that there was sort of some evidence that that could be a driver. Now, it's not so much believed anymore. That was just a partial argument at the time. And we've realized that actually they could stimulate demand a bit more. But right then, there was a belief that unemployment should be 8%. If we're in that sort of scenario where structural unemployment is high, and there could be any reason, should the government be doing something to bring that natural rate down?
My priority is yes. What that is, I'm not sure. What I'm trying to tease out in my mind here is how much of this, structural unemployment is due to, people's preferences. And I think I'm getting a little bit caught up on the gaming example here, but how much of it is due to people's preferences versus how much of it is due to supply side frictions or frictions in the economy that is stopping people from finding work and from firms finding workers. And so, if it's just people's preferences, I don't want to go on record forever saying this, I'm kind of less concerned. But if it's something about the economy that's changed, that there's a skills mismatch, there's an education lag, AI takes off, I got no idea how to use AI, therefore I get made unemployed, but I
Mm.
still want to work. I need to work for various reasons. I can see some role for government. What that role is would depend on the specific issue, whether it's an information asymmetry that we are talking about before, or whether it's an education skills mismatch kind of story. That's
So I think
my best crack. What do you got?
that's a great answer to an ill-formed question. So it's for listeners, the context here is I've sabotaged our conversation to bring up completely irrelevant and different topics compared to what we agreed about because it's a lot of fun to do that. So I'll just put my apologies there. But in this
I should
specific
explain it
situation,
anyway.
I think the idea that yes, it depends on the type of shock really matters. Now, when someone says gaming, for example, I find it a bit difficult to understand how that leads to unemployment rather than not in the labor force activity.
Yeah.
And when we're talking that way, we do need to think a bit about how it's affecting flows, like different types of labor market flows. So, what are some of the impediments or influences to flows that you're most concerned about for the Australian economy over the coming decade?
I know AI rate of change is quicker, and I know that's why we're particularly concerned about it. But I'm also, maybe I'm being the free market economist here and the laissez-faire. I'm still not so worried about it. We've seen rates of technological change across a range of things over history. The I forget what you call it, but like the telephone connector, right? There used to be people who would sit in a room and connect people's phone calls, and then someone designed a clever way of doing that automatically, and the employment of telephone connectors went through the floor. There was none. That was terrible for that industry, but didn't lead to mass unemployment. Those people just went and worked somewhere else. So I'm probably a bit less worried about the rate, the concerns around AI and structural changes in the labor market. What's different this time? Maybe it's the kind of skills that the new jobs require, sufficiently different to the existing jobs. Whereas back in my telephone connector example, they were all quite, manual labor intensive jobs that then moved to other manual labor intensive jobs, or what is it called? Repetitive
Mm.
manual kind of jobs. Whereas now we might be moving to um, jobs that require skills that are very different from the ones they currently have.
Yeah, yeah.
That's all I can think about. What's your view on what are the main things coming up over the 10-year horizon?
No, I loved your description there, so I just want to chat a little bit about it. So there is a question that you'll often hear from people, which they'll pose to you when they talk about great AI risk. I just want to note that, like in terms of the risk of job substitution for Australia, Jeff Borland has done some great work there, finding that those risks are generally, they're high, but they're overstated. I think that's a useful starting point when we think through the skills and tasks available. But a lot of people's views are coming from asking what is the comparative advantage for humans? As AI can seem to do a lot of mental tasks seemingly like costlessly. And you can get them interacting with each other and being innovative under quite broad ideas of strategically what are you trying to achieve. So the human might have some strategic impulse about I want this, but then a whole set of things around it, the modeling, the writing, the data analysis, and everything could be automated by AI. So you could essentially replace our organization by one person sitting in their basement just saying, I want a set of research on stuff, right? So where do humans go from there? And the thing is that that's hard. That's a mentally challenging way of perceiving the world because you can't see those future opportunities. For that, I'd point at this piece by Keynes on the economic possibilities for our grandchildren. And that
Okay.
he talked about what was happening. He was talking about things like the Great Depression and how it wasn't because there was suddenly, a situation where there was a collapse in our possibilities. Instead, our possibilities have grown so quickly that now the ability for humans to go and provide labor towards these has become really dislocated. And that's leading to mass unemployment temporarily. But over time, if we, introduce the right sort of policies and we allow for things and we have the right sort of new version of state, a social democratic type state, that can lead to a situation where our grandchildren will have more and they will work less and they will have better lives. And that is the purpose of what we want. So, in the same way that he has that vision, We should be looking at risks like AI as offering us the same type of outcome. We should be looking for that vision as well and asking how can we design a welfare state and a set of policies that allow people dignity and can allow that transition, can allow people to move into job opportunities that do appear and make sure that our grandchildren are in a much better position than we are.